Hello everyone. Once again, we are back on PushpalataLearnEd Live. Happy evening. This is Jude Deva from Pushpalata Vidya Mandir on PushpalataLearnEd Live channel, Expert Talks. I welcome everyone on behalf of Pushpalataschools. We have gained a lot of information as well as knowledge from various experts from different fields. We learn and upgrade ourselves day by day, thinking about our future. We have lots and lots of things in our mind running all over 24/7. How do we tackle all our tough situations? What is necessary for all of us to be calm in this tech world? Let's listen to our expert, Aarti C. Rajaratnam, psychologist, author, NLP Master Practitioner and Trainer, who's here with us on Expert Talks on the topic Finding Inner Calm in Chaotic Times. Aarti C. Rajaratnam has a master's in applied psychology with specialization in clinical psychology, childhood and adolescent mental health from the University of Delhi, South Campus. She completed a special 14-month internship at the prestigious Rajkumari Amrit Kaur Child Guidance Center at New Delhi. She is a master practitioner and trainer in Neuro-Linguistic Programming and is also trained in Transactional Analysis, Dream Analysis, Transpersonal Psychology, and Counselling. But before we meet our expert, let me hand over the session to Mr. Sendil, Regional Manager, Oxford University Press, who will say a few words.
Yeah, very good evening to all. Myself, Senthil, taking care of entire South Tamil Nadu for Oxford University Press. First of all, I would like to welcome to all the students, teachers, and parents also for this wonderful occasion. And I would like to welcome and thank to two persons. One is our renowned resource person, Aarti Rajaratnam ma'am, for this wonderful opportunity, and another one ma'am for the director of the school, entire school, Pushpalata Institution, ma'am Pushpalata Purna ma'am. And on behalf of Oxford University, I just want to give your mission. Oxford University Press is the department of University of Oxford. It furthers the university objective of excellence in research, scholarship, and education by publishing worldwide. In order to further this mission of quality dissemination of knowledge, OEP India once again assure to make the highest quality academic and professional content available around the globe. It offers multiple options in various courses based on the curriculum prescribed. Being the world's largest university press with the widest global presence, its various quality check ensure OEP's commitment to the continuous development of its publishing program, which not only includes school books, titles of general interest, dictionaries, atlas, but also digital learning and assessment products. To provide continuous supports to teachers and educators, teachers' resource packs are designed as a reliable and convenient aid for using OEP textbooks. Our digital resources like Oxford Educate helps teachers move effortlessly between books and digital materials, giving flexibility and power of choice to the teachers to teach dynamically and digitally as well as. Thank you, sir. Thanks for the opportunity. Now over to Mr. Jude, sir. Please, sir.
Yeah, thank you, sir. Thank you so much on behalf of Pushpalata Schools. Now we request Aarti ma'am to take over the session.
Good evening, sir, and thank you so much for the opportunity and for the introduction. I'm sure there are students online. So good evening, all of you. And I know these are very, very unfortunate times for us because we've been deprived of the opportunity to interact with our friends in person. However, I promise you that the next 1 hour that we have this interactive session will be something that you can think about. I'm not going to give you quick fix solutions, but I'm going to just interact with you. And I know that we have questions in the end that many of you have put forward, which I will answer. So when they told me that this session was happening, I decided to share with you one of my favorite stories, something that reflects the current pandemic situation that we are in. And why do I use stories when I work with students? It's because once the session is over, it will give you a lot of food for thought. It will be something that you can think about, something that you can reflect about even after the session is over. So this is a story of a farmer who was a very, very busy farmer, of course, and he was walking around in his farm, and at one point he found an egg. Now, it did not look like the duck eggs that he had seen. It didn't look like any other bird's egg that he was familiar with. And therefore, what he decided to do was the most commonsensical thing. He took the egg and he went and left it in the chicken shed. And he decided that whenever that would hatch, he would find out what bird it would be and place it accordingly in his farm or in the forest or whatever. So that was his plan. But as with most busy people, he forgot about the egg, and out from that egg hatched an eagle. And now this eagle did not have a reference point for how to be an eagle. So what it started doing was it started imitating all the hens in the, that it was familiar with. So very soon, the eagle started pecking on the ground, eating small grains. It did not learn how to eat meat. It did not learn how to use its wings and fly. And it so became like one of the hens that was in the farm. Many years later, a real eagle swooped down in the farm. And this was the first time this eagle that believed that it was a hen looked at a real eagle. And it turned to the pig and it asked, "What bird is this? It looks so majestic, so beautiful." And the pig said, "Oh, that's the eagle. It's the king of the birds. It belongs to the sky and it's supposed to fly very, very high. And it's a bird of prey." And this eagle that believed it was a hen said, "Oh, that must be a beautiful life. But here I am. I'm a hen and I belong to the ground." Now, the reason I'm using the story is not to put the hen down in any way, but this pandemic situation where all of us are confined to our home spaces and to online learning is very much like an eagle that has been restricted from the sky and asked to stay in a chicken shed. I know that many of you must be feeling very, very stressed out, not extremely comfortable staying online most of the day, in spite of your teachers putting in a lot of effort with their teaching and learning practices. So what I'd like to do today, and I know that many of you are teenagers who've joined me today. So what I'd like to do today is to just leave some food for thought, some thoughts you can work on, some things that you can change. And I'm sure that all of you have a piece of paper and pen ready with you because we're going to do activities. Now, I know that, a lot of people train using PowerPoint presentations, but the truth is when I use slides, learning goes down by almost 90%. So we have to use activities. So I'd like you to join me as I do the activities, because that way you will be able to learn a lot more and take back a lot more today. So the first aspect of what I'd like to share with you today, very briefly, is that the teen years, the adolescent years as you are in, is a period where there's a lot of change in your body and in your brain very specifically. So how does this impact and how does this affect the pandemic time that you're in? So the first thing that I'd like you to understand, for boys, the hormone that you're going to experience is called testosterone. It's a hormone that makes you a little restless. It can make you a little short-tempered. Okay. And usually on a day that you didn't have a pandemic and you could go out, you would have regulated or you would have been able to balance the testosterone surges in your body through physical activity, through sports, through team games, through individual games, any of this. Now, when you're at home, that does not happen. So you would notice that, the skin in this part of your face starts becoming extremely oily. You're always craving for spicy, oily food, like, the biryanis and all of that will be extremely interesting. But if your mother made a rasam and rice, it may not be as interesting as a fried food or something that is very, very delicious. Girls, on the other hand, you have two hormones, progesterone and estrogen, and progesterone is likely to be more. And the symptoms that you would have would be very similar to what boys would experience with testosterone. The only difference is the food craving becomes chocolate related or sweets related. And apart from this, you don't get angry as much as you would feel extremely sad and imbalanced, not able to trust anybody, things like that. Because basically what happens is the hormones, our brain is a biochemical factory, and our hormones can impact the way we think. Now, how do we work with this? It's important to know the solutions, not just the problems. So hormones are required for our growth and development. So we don't treat it. We don't give it treatment. However, what we can do is to regulate it. So changing our lifestyle in such a way that the hormone is able to balance itself out. So what is the simplest way that we can use as students is, for boys, since it's testosterone, about 300 to 350 minutes per week as physical activity. And for girls, about 200 to 250 minutes a week as physical activity usually helps to balance out the ill effects or the unpleasant effects of these hormones which are required for our growth. Now, what kind of exercise would you suggest? Anything right from a brisk walk, playing shuttle, to any form of stretching, because the moment you start moving, you start changing the ecosystem in the body and in the brain. One, the metabolism in your body changes, but two, more importantly, chemicals called endorphins, which are required for your immune system to develop and for you to feel more calm, relaxed, and happy, set into the brain. And this is the first set of changes that I would suggest to you. The second aspect of it is that I told you your brain also is going through a lot of changes. So the emotional part of the brain is likely to be more active than the the thinking part of the brain. So if I were to give you a simple example, now earlier, before the pandemic, you would probably be at home for a couple of hours, maybe just 1 or 2 hours, maybe, and then fall asleep and all that. And at that time, your interaction with your parents would have been very minimal. So the opportunity, or rather the chance for you to get into rebellious fighting, which is quite common in this age group, is less. Now in the pandemic, I've heard from a lot of teenagers that you're unable to connect with your parents, that you get into fights, they don't understand you, all of these things. So one major aspect of this is for us to understand what is really happening with our emotions. So one of the things that happens in the teenager's brain is when there is an emotion, for example, I say something, you get angry, you're not able to forget the anger and move on to the next emotion. You keep thinking about it repeatedly, and the emotion starts exaggerating to the point that you're not able to change your mind. And I can give you a small example. So I started my career many years back, 22 years back, as a school counselor. So I used to work in a very famous girls' school in my own hometown. In my class, there was a student, a 9th standard student, who was a very, very intelligent student. She was, she was one of those students who was very good in sports. She was good in dramatics. She was very good academically. She made friends easily. So she was able to balance everything in her life very beautifully. And the teachers also liked her very much. Suddenly, in the month of July, that particular year, there was a drop in her studies. And then, slowly there were behavior problems, as the teachers started calling it. And they used to send her for counseling, but she would never speak to me. And it would be very difficult as a counselor, to work with her, because she would not speak to me. And for 1 hour, sometimes she would sit silent. So by October, her behavior and her learning and everything had gone down. So the school unfortunately had to give her a TC, and they told her to leave the school. I was very upset as a counselor, because I didn't know, how I could have supported her, because there was no cooperation from her. Many years later, about 2-3 years back, when I was traveling to the US, I was stopping in Frankfurt. I had a stopover in Frankfurt, and I saw this girl very smartly dressed and walking past. And I called out to her. And of course, she remembered that, I was in the same school. So I was very curious, and I asked her, what happened to you at that time? What was it that made you change suddenly? And then she said, ma'am, do you remember that chemistry teacher who was appointed as a temporary teacher? I said, yes, I do remember her. She said she was very partial in her corrections, and I could never shift that out of my mind. I would always, when I would sit down to study, I would always be thinking about her. It would make me very angry, very sad, very upset, and I could not come out of those emotions easily. And the moment the school shifted, like I changed school, I no longer had this trigger. I no longer had somebody irritating me, and therefore I was able to manage. By this, I'm not saying you have to change school. What I'm trying to say is, for a teenager, emotions tend to become very powerful. So many times when somebody triggers you, like it could be a teacher, it could be a parent, it could be your brother or sister, when they trigger it, you're not able to shift and move out of that emotion easily. And that starts interfering with everything. So today's session, we will work a little more on emotions, but I'd like you to understand the emotional system is very powerful in the adolescent years, and we need to learn how to regulate our emotions, because this is the age where we can learn it step by step and develop it into our system. This is the second aspect of it. The third aspect of what I would like for us to understand, the adolescent brain, for it, taking a risk is rewarding. So any risky behavior is very, very rewarding. So this sometimes is also taken to the extreme, especially with children where parents do not support you and say, no, this is right, this is wrong, or you can do this, you can't do this. So when they don't set limits, this becomes dangerous. At this point during the pandemic, you are the ones who find it very, very difficult, because you're unable to regulate your emotions, and you're also finding it difficult because you're not able to express yourself. So we'll go through what is really happening. And this is where I would like to introduce a word called the identity crisis. You are beginning to understand that you're different from your parents. So till about 10 years, 11 years, you really understood that, this is my father, this is my mother, this is my teacher. You were taking a lot of pride in being their child or their student. Now you want to be known as yourself. That also, when you are cooped up at home, locked up at home, it can cause a lot of stress. Now, why am I talking about all of these things? Because unless we understand this, finding inner calm or finding a way to work with our emotions may not work. So just make a note of this. But I've also spoken for about 15 minutes. Now, if anyone has spoken for 15 minutes, the brain is likely to shut down. So we're going to do a small activity, and I'd like all of you to put your hands out like this. Okay, so I'd like you to put your hands out like this. And as you're sitting down, and if you were standing, that would be even better. As you're sitting down, I'd like you to draw a circle around you. Now, you may wonder, why are we doing this? Now, this first circle, apart from making you move, this first circle is what I technically call the touching circle. Okay, and it's in my book, but I will tell you as an activity so that you can do it. So this first circle is called the touching circle. In this touching circle, I normally allow people I really trust, and I will allow them to touch me. Now, touch can be physical touch, and it can also be emotional touch, meaning the power to hurt me. So only certain people, when they're very close to you, can cause hurt emotionally, not any random stranger, but somebody who's very, very close to me. So this touching circle is meant for people who I trust very much, and I will allow them to touch me physically or emotionally. Now, the space inside this touching circle is what I call the personal space. Now, personal space belongs only to you. And if you have ever been in a crowded bus or train or place, you will notice that if a close friend or somebody you like comes and stands next to you, you have no problem. Your body is very comfortable with it, even though they may be very close to you. But the same thing, if it's a stranger or somebody that you do not like very much, you will notice that you immediately want to move away, or you ask them to move away. So that is technically what we call the personal space. It belongs only to you, and you will not allow anybody inside that space. And the second circle, so the first circle is the touching circle, and I'll tell you how we work these circles. The second circle is the good friend circle. Now, the good friend circle is a circle where I will allow people I trust very much, but I will not allow touch. They don't get to touch me physically, and they don't get to touch me emotionally, which means they cannot hurt me. The third circle is what I call the okay people circle. These are people I meet every day. I may interact, I may have conversation, I may have a meal with them, but there is no trust, no touch, just people that I know very much. So it could be a classmate, it could be a relative, it can be anybody, but it could be a person where I have no trust or no touch. The fourth circle is what I call the stranger circle, and one of the most important circles. Why is the stranger circle so important? It's the circle where I will put people who are capable of hurting me. It's not people I don't know, it's people I know, but people who are capable of hurting me. Why is it important to know that? Now, there may be a person that may be very close to your family, but always tries to cheat your parents or talk behind their back. Or you could have had a friend who came along with you, was very trusting and all of that, but at some point, immediately, they cheated you, or they let you down, or they were behaved in a way that was not trustworthy. Those are the people that you put in the stranger circle. Now, I know that all of you up to grade 10 are doing science, and you will probably in chemistry have been introduced to what's called the Niels Bohr atomic model. So you will notice that there is a nucleus in the center, and then you have the shells and there are electrons. So since you have a piece of paper and pen in front of you, what I'd like you to do is to put a dot in the center and draw the 4 circles. So the center is where you are. That's where the nucleus is. And you will draw the first circle. The first circle is where you will have the people that you trust very much and will allow to touch you. So you will draw them like electrons. The second circle, which is the good friend circle, that's where you will put people you trust but don't allow touch. Okay people and strangers. Why is it important to put these things here? Especially during this pandemic, since our relationships have changed, some of us experience a lot of stress because we bring in the wrong people into our circles. Normally, as teenagers, when somebody treats us very well, we immediately bring them into the touching circle. And then, we realize that, they're not as trustworthy as they promise to be, or they seem to be. And then we feel very hurt. As a rule of thumb, what I normally suggest to teenagers, a very simple thing, whenever you meet somebody, get to know them, bring them in the stranger circle, observe them for a couple of weeks. Nobody can pretend all the time, right? So you look at them, put them there in the stranger circle for a little while. And if you notice that their behavior is the same over a period of time, and they're very consistent, they're very trustworthy, you can bring them closer to the okay people and still have an observation. At the same time, interact very well. And this is also the time they are also getting to know you. They're also being able to see what your strengths and weaknesses are, and if this friendship can be worked on. And then to bring somebody into the good friend circle, you should have known them at least for a period of 6 months, because only then you will be able to build healthy relationships. Now, in India, generally what happens is, because we get to meet people, and we see that our families, many of our families tend to treat guests very in a very friendly manner. We think that it's okay to bring everybody into our inner circle, but As we grow, we need to realize that a healthy relationship is one where you have healthy boundaries. Now, at the adolescent years, a lot of infatuation can also happen. You could get attracted to somebody in your class or somebody you know, and this is not something to be ashamed of because it's part of your normal development. However, you also need to understand that this is part of your growing up. It's not something, so in the movies, they will always show you that this is something that's supposed to happen lifetime for a lifetime and things like that. Don't get confused with all this. Take everything in your stride and put them in the right circles. Whether you like somebody or you meet somebody, put them in the right circles. For somebody to reach your touching circle, you must have known them at least for a year. Because when you use this rule, it helps you to build healthy boundaries and healthy relationships with all people. Now, are there any rules? Should I have my parents always in the touching circle? Should I have my teachers here? There are no rules. These are your relationships. Your relationships are special for you. Right? So if you really like somebody and somebody is very trustworthy, bring them closer. If you find that somebody, even a close family relative or somebody that you know very well, is behaving in ways that are not trustworthy, you have the right to move them to an outside circle. Why am I giving you these rules? Because they don't teach us this. Right? And it's important to understand that the quality of our relationships, the quality of our boundaries make our life much healthier. And if I don't have healthy boundaries, I become very clingy, I become very possessive, then it becomes very, very tricky for me to handle life. Now, why are relationships so important? Because the quality of our relationships define how happy and healthy I will be. And the first relationship that I will have is the relationship that I have with myself. So we'll go through that with a few examples. Now, the first thing I'd like you to do on a piece of paper, please draw 4 quadrants. So divide the paper into 4 quadrants, okay? And on the first quadrant, you will write physical. Second quadrant, emotional. Third quadrant will be mental. And fourth quadrant is what we call relationships or relational. Okay, so I'll repeat it again. The first quadrant is what we call physical. Second quadrant, I'm going to give you emotional. Third quadrant, mental. And fourth quadrant, relational. Okay. Now, what I want you to do, I'm going to take off the video for a second because I want you to think internally. What I want you to do is in each of these areas, so take physical meaning anything to do with your body, your health. Second, when I say emotional, anything to do with the way you process emotions. So I feel angry, I feel sad, I feel jealous. So all of those areas. Mental, anything to do with your mind is to do with your thoughts, your willpower, the way you think about things, the way you process information, all of that. And relational, as it is, how your relationships are. So what I would like you to do is to quickly, and I'll take off the video for a second, and I'm going to give you about 5 to 6 seconds to think about what you would like to change or develop in your physical self, what you would like to change or develop in your emotional sense, what would you like to change or develop in your mental sense, and what would you like to change or develop in your relationships. So take a moment to write down very quickly 4 goals that you would like to set. I hope you've been able to write something for yourself. Now, some of you may be wondering, what should I write in this area? What should I write in that area? If you're not very sure, just leave it empty. And as we go through the discussion, you will be able to find some basic ideas on how to develop that area. So when it comes to the physical side, the first thing that I already mentioned, remember, if you're a boy, you need 350 minutes of physical activity. If you're a girl, you need 250 minutes of physical activity. That's definitely one goal that all of you will require. But even more important than that is sleep. Now, since we've gone on to this online medium, a lot of us have a lot more access to the internet. We are using the internet a lot more and things like that. So many of our sleep habits have changed. Sleep is a very important aspect of our daily life. Now, when we sleep well, for example, regularly, and when I sleep deeply, what happens is there are cells in my brain called glial cells, which remove the stress hormones from my brain. Anything that was difficult during the day, anything that was stressful during the day, the glial cells remove them, they filter them out. Now, when you don't have regular habits and when you don't sleep very deeply because you're using gadgets or because you're distracted about something else, what happens is your brain continues to remain in that stressful state. And that becomes very difficult for you when you're trying to bring a calm, um, calm yourself down when there is a difficult period that's happening, or when you have a fight with somebody, or when you're finding something very difficult to handle. So the first two things that I would suggest for anybody in the physical realm, see what kind of exercise you can bring in. And two, most important, see how you can balance your sleep habits. And this is where one very important aspect that I would like to bring to you is your generation, surprisingly, unlike my generation, you're all what we call owls. Now, what is an owl? It's a child or an adult who can work right through the evening. So starting say 6 in the evening till 12, 1, 2 in the night, you're able to work very well. But if I asked you to wake up early in the morning, you find that you're not able to study as well, or you're not able to focus as well. As opposed to the other type, which is called the lark. Larks are people who wake up early in the morning. I'm a lark, for example. I can wake up anytime in the morning, as early as you want me to do, and I'll be very, very active. But in the evenings or late in the night, I may not be so productive. So find out first which is your most productive time, and try and plan your schedule, your sleep schedule, your study schedule according to whether you're an owl or a lark. So these would be 2 or 3 areas in the physical realm which will be very, very useful. The second aspect, which is the emotional side, and like I already told you, for a teenager, emotions become very, very difficult. So let's try and understand. Every emotion is good. Every honest emotion is a positive emotion. However, how I express my emotion is extremely important. So if I feel angry, I can't go out and hit other people, but I need to know what to do with anger. So the first rule that I normally ask for us to understand is to acknowledge that every emotion is good. However, how I express this emotion, how I regulate this emotion is extremely important. So this is where one of the activities that I would give you, and since you have a piece of paper and a pen, I would like you to think of a situation. Think of a situation where you keep repeatedly getting stuck. So, for example, it's a situation where you and your father get into an argument and you remain very angry with him because he didn't understand you, or you are compared unfavorably with somebody else and you feel very, very ashamed, and you feel very, very guilty that you're not able to rise up. So all of us have situations where we find it very, very difficult to handle something. So I'd like you to identify one situation or two situations where you would like changes. Now, for example, in my case, there was a little bit of anxiety. Let's assume that I have anxiety. What is anxiety? Anxiety is when I want something to happen, but it's not happening in that way. So I experience something like fear, but of the future. Okay. Fear is something that I feel when there is something real. So if there is a snake here and I react to that, that's usually from fear. But there is an exam tomorrow. I have not yet written the exam, but I'm feeling something. That is called anxiety. Okay. So it's not yet happened. Okay. So if I'm experiencing anxiety, now, whenever I feel anxious, I'm not able to further do anything. I start getting stuck. I feel like, my body is tightened. I'm feeling very stressed. So, for every emotion that you feel, whether it's happiness, sadness, anger, there will be a physical response, a physiological response, as we call it. Okay. So, this is where I'd like you to first think of a situation where you would like to change an emotion. You'd like to do something different. So, this is where what I'd like you to do. First question that I'm asking you, what am I feeling? It's important for us to know what we are feeling to be able to either change it, regulate it, or to be able to stay with it and to be able to let it go. So, first question, what am I feeling? Okay, so in my case, like I said, an example, I'm feeling anxious. Okay, so I have an exam tomorrow, so I'm feeling anxious. So, identify what is it you're feeling. And usually it will not be one clear emotion, it may be 2, 3 emotions that you're feeling. So the first step, I'm feeling anxious and I'm feeling also a little guilty that I did not study for the exam. So I'm feeling anxious that I may not do well, I may fail the test, and I'm also feeling guilty because I did not study sufficiently. So identify the 1 or 2 emotions that you are feeling. Second question, what would I like to do about it? So do I want to stay with the emotion? Do I want to change the emotion? You need to identify, because some emotions like sadness, it may be good to stay with it and let it go. Don't try to quickly change sadness, because then it becomes very difficult. Okay. Tamil solluvaanga aluvada. If you don't cry, that sadness is going to stay inside and come out in another form or create more problems for you. So some emotions, it's good to stay with it and let it go. Okay. some emotions, it may be good to change it to another state. So you have to ask the second question, do I want to change it? Do I want to stay with it? The third question I would ask you, okay, instead of what you are feeling, what if you decide that you want to change it, what would I like to feel instead? So instead of this emotion, what would I like to feel instead is the next question. Now, instead of anxiety, I'd like to feel calm. Or instead of anxiety, I'd like to feel more empowered, more powerful. Instead of anxiety, I'd like to feel a little more respected. So you have to identify what would you like to feel instead. Now, when you identify what you would like to feel instead, then setting up an action plan becomes very easy. So what is the action plan that you can set? That is the fourth question. Write down 6 ways in which you can deal with this. So the usual way we suggest as psychologists, 2 of those methods must be physical. So it can be a breathing technique, going out for a walk, exercising, doing some physical. So if you love dancing, it can be dancing. Because when you work with the physical aspect also, it's easier to deal with emotion. Instead of sitting down and just saying, I'm angry, I don't want to feel anything, becoming more restricted and constricted increases anger. So instead, it would be good to just silently go for a walk or, drink some water. Sometimes, drinking water helps. In those days when I was in school, they would say count from 1 to 10, but you can't take an emotion to your thought. You can take an emotion through movement. So it would be a good way to do that. The 2 ways need to be physical. 2 need to be something that you can take action upon. So for example, I'm feeling anxious. My exam is tomorrow. So what action can I take? I make sure that I have a study schedule now so that I'm able to focus and learn so that this anxiety reduces. Or I could ask my mother or my father for help to help me with my studies so that as they help me, I'm able to reduce the anxiety. Or I could do a small exercise like a meditation. I could download an app which helps me to meditate and calm down. So these are all ways in which I can deal with the anxiety. So these would be 2 actions. So 2 must be physical, 2 must be actual actions that will help me to change that situation. The last 2 can be something that you can plan for the future. So in future, when I'm going to have anxiety, I may have anxiety for another test. So I prepare well in advance so that the anxiety level is less. So depending on what you have, setting down 6 ways in which you can deal with it. Now, the third area, which is mental, working with the mind. Now, our thoughts are very, very powerful. Okay. And all of us, we think differently, but many of us go through extremes of thought, what we call polarized thinking. It must be good or it must be bad. These people are good or these people are bad. This is beneficial for me, not beneficial for me. So we take these extreme stands. Panna ipdi pannano illana pannave kudadu. So, these extreme stands always filter my thoughts. So if you find that you have extremes of thought, try and bring a balance. Okay, everybody has good and bad, and I need to appreciate the good in the other person. So bringing that balance helps me to keep my mental health much more balanced. The second way is mental filtering. Only what I want to hear, I will hear. So somebody is telling me something, but I take only what I want to hear. So that also causes a lot of problem. Another way is mind reading. Without going and asking somebody what happened, I start reading their mind. Oh, they must be thinking this. Okay. So there are 9 such thought distortions, as we call them. I'm not going into all of them. But what I'd like, another one is catastrophizing. So anything that happens, I think about the worst case that can happen and I worry about it. So if you notice that your thoughts are the reason why you start feeling very, very upset, one of the things that you can realize is that the mind, now I've been talking for almost 35 minutes. And if you notice, even the most interested student, after some time, you will look around, you'll be looking around, a little bit of daydreaming will happen. And this I need to understand when I work with a group of teenagers, that I will not have your full attention throughout the session. And if I use slides, even that attention that I get, it will go away. So here is where I want you to understand the default mode. Now, in all of your gadgets, you have a default mode. The default mode for the mind, for your thoughts, is what is called mind wandering. If you leave any normal person just like that, 50 to 80% of their time will be in mind wandering. Because if I'm sitting here, and just before we started, actually, the screen was on for a long time. So I was looking at it, but then I suddenly started thinking about something else. That's called mind wandering. 50 to 80% of our normal thinking is in the mind wandering space. Of that, about 90% is what is called the negativity bias. Negativity bias means my mind, it goes through few stages. It look around, it sees what is the most negative. So during the COVID, everybody is sitting and looking at how many people died. We didn't see how many people recovered. We kept seeing how many people died. Or if, for example, I can give you another example. You're sleeping in the night and you suddenly hear a sound outside your house. The brain will immediately think, maybe it's a ghost, maybe it's a thief. You think of the worst situation. You don't think, oh, maybe it must be the cat, it must be just going down, it must have spilled something, or it would have dropped something. We think of the worst situation. So, or I'll give you another even more common example. Now, let's assume that I meet you and I pay you a compliment. I tell you many positive things about you. And then I also say that one negative. What will the brain hold? It will hold that one negative. That is an example of negativity bias. So the negativity bias starts where I look around me and I pick up the most negative thing. Next, what I do is I start thinking, overthinking about it, and I lose the big picture. So why did my mother say this about me? Why did she say this about me? And I lose the big picture. Okay, so my thinking is beginning to already become smaller. Instead of thinking bigger, I'm beginning to think smaller. Third, what happens is I start when as I keep overthinking it. The third part is overthinking. The second part, I lose the big picture. Third part, I start overthinking it and I build a lot of stories around it. Fourth, what happens is I lose connection. So I overthink it so much and I start saying maybe this is the situation and I lose connection with reality. This is one of the most common problems that I've seen teenagers having during this pandemic and during this lockdown. If you do have this negativity bias, one of the things that you need to understand is you are the only thinker in your mind. Nobody else is thinking for you. You need to start realizing what kind of thoughts am I allowing to my mind? Because when my mind is wandering, how many negative thoughts am I allowing? But that I don't mean you have to have positive thoughts all the time. You need to have balanced, ordinary thoughts. Oh, okay, it's raining outside, casual. Okay, don't get so excited. And because you get excited now, calming yourself down becomes a problem. So any extreme in your thoughts or emotions will prevent you from experiencing that calm. So getting this balanced thought, a balanced mind is not for or against anything. It's able to bring about a neutral, calm space. So for that, whenever you notice that you're bringing in negativity bias or you're having a negative thought, just say it's a thought and a thought can be changed. What would I like to think here? So I was thinking negatively about my friend. I don't like my friend. I find him or her very, very irritating. I'm always thinking about that person in a negative sense. I just say, okay, I don't want to think about this person. I have other things to focus on, right? Or you don't have to go immediately and do positive thoughts about that person. All you need to do is, I don't want to think this. I would like to think this. And this is where focus comes in. So let's do a small activity just for you to understand how this can be done. So just close your eyes. And as you close your eyes, all of us have played with dice, right? So when we played snakes and ladders, Ludo and all that, we've played with dice. So please pick up dice. Imagine in your mind that you're rolling 2 dice and let the dice fall to the table and let it form 7. So 2 numbers that will form 7. So it can be a 5 and 2. It can be a 6 and 1. It can be a 3 and 4. Okay, so all of you are able to see it. Most of you who can visualize can do this, you can imagine. Now pick up the dice again, roll it again. And this time, form 7 again, but with 2 different numbers. Okay, and this is exactly what I call cognitive focus. You can immediately shift your thinking from one type of thinking to another, because as teenagers, you are developing your ability to daydream, right? The ability, the part of you that can use visualization, you're able to learn, able to use very well now. You can use the same one to move out of a negative thought into a balanced thought. I'm not saying positive or extreme thought, but a balanced thought. So when it comes to the mind, one, become aware of how you're thinking. Know that you will go into the negativity bias. And the third, most important, remember that it's a thought and a thought can always be changed. And the last, the fourth part, which is called the relational. Now, like I told you, relationships are very important, and the quality of our relationships always decides how happy we are going to be. In fact, many researchers have shown how happy people who have good relationships live much longer. So this is where I'd like you to understand see what relationships you have. The 4 circles that I taught you earlier will also be very useful. But here, I'd like to bring to your attention a very important thing. Now, let's assume that you and your father or you and your mother keep having these small arguments. You're a little rebellious, they're also a little controlling. So you're not able to build a good relationship, and it's very, very uncomfortable being at home. Would like to have a better relationship. You would like to speak to your friends a little more, things like that, but they're not allowing you. So when this kind of situation happens and you're not very comfortable, it's important not to cut them off, but to try and build a relationship. How can a relationship be built? So any relationship which you value needs time to build. So this is where I'm going to introduce you to the last concept for today, which is called a connection ritual. Okay. Now, ritual is something that you do every day. Okay. Now, some of you may be lighting a lamp or lighting a candle in your house, or you may be saying prayers every day, or you may be doing something like cleaning your house. These are all rituals because you do them every day, right? So similarly, when you want to build a relationship, a connection with somebody, you build what is called a connection ritual. What's a connection ritual? Now, let's assume that my father and I have a relationship which has a lot of small fights and friction and things like that. I love my father, but we have these arguments and these fights. He also loves me, but we keep having these small clashes. How do we change it? Sit down, speak with him at a time that he's also calm. Let him know, I want to build this relationship, right? And you let him know that you would like him to make 15 to 30 minutes. 15 minutes is good. If you can make 30 minutes, even better. 15 to 30 minutes every day where both of you will connect with each other, doing something both of you enjoy. Now, doing something both of you enjoy doesn't mean you can go and watch TV together. It must be like playing shuttle, having a conversation, cooking together, going for a walk. It can be something that both of you enjoy very much. And this is a time where both of you spend time specifically connecting with each other and communicating with each other. Why is this such an important thing? Because every day when you start doing this, you start realizing that this person is genuinely loving, this person is genuinely caring. 1 or 2 times they may feel angry, 1 or 2 times we may get into fights, but we still have this connection ritual where we can connect with each other. So as you keep building this, and this can be done in friendships, so you want to make a good friend, you could make sure that every day for 15 minutes you have a chat. Right now, that's the only possibility of having a chat over the phone or over a video call or something like that. Build that relationship, because when you spend time to build this connection ritual over a period of time, the relationship becomes easier. So even if you have small fights, a little bit of rebellion, you will be able to bridge that gap better. So working with the physical side with sleep and exercise is the most important. Second, working with emotions, knowing what you're feeling, knowing what you'd like to do with it, how to change it, and the 6 steps. Working with thoughts and being able to shift your thoughts. And most important, working with relationships. When you work with these 4 areas in a very balanced way, every day spend time working on all the 4 areas. It can be 5 minutes, can be 10 minutes, not how much time that you spend in each area, but how well you're able to do this over a period of time. So if you're able to balance all 4 areas, finding calm, whether there's a pandemic, whether there's a problem, nothing outside will affect you, because you're able to master internally the 4 areas: the physical, the emotional, the mental, and the relational aspects of yourself. So if there are any questions, I'll take them. I was told that somebody would be reading out questions for me. So I'll take those questions and I'll answer them.
Yes, ma'am. That was so lovely and the session was so lively.
Thank you, Jude. Thank you.
Okay. And we have collected questions from our students.
Yes, sir.
So let me start with the first question. What are the books that you would recommend to read in psychology for beginners?
Actually, psychology books I wouldn't ask you to read, because they're very dry, boring books. Okay. Because what happens is when you take a textbook in psychology, sometimes it's very, very boring, right? So I wouldn't suggest you to read any of those books. However, what I would recommend that you read is a book called The Gift of Our Imperfections by Brené Brown, because it's a beautiful book that says that, all of us will have flaws, we all can change. That's one book that's genuinely inspired me a lot. And in terms of other self-help books, there are a lot of people who write self-help books right now, but a lot of that is very simplistic. They just try to say, if you think you can do it and all of these things. I wouldn't ask you to do that. I would ask you to do a more balanced perspective on all of this. So Brené Brown's book says, yes, we will all have our flaws, but we are still able to do this. So it's one book that I would definitely suggest everybody read. So I hope that.
Okay. How can one know if he needs to consult a psychologist?
See, the thing is, mental illness is an extreme state. Okay, there are people who lose connection with reality because there are chemical changes in the brain. So it may be running in families. There will be a genetic component in all of those things. If there is already, so the first and the most severe cases are when there is a susceptibility in the family. So you know already in the family history there is somebody with schizophrenia, somebody who has bipolar, a mental illness history. Then right in the beginning, there should be a little bit of awareness in the family saying that if there are changes, you should do this. But in the milder forms, I would suggest that everybody can go to a counselor. There's nothing wrong because all of us at some point require a little bit of support. Now, let's assume, Jude, that you have a fractured leg, right? And it's in a cast. Before you were able to put your entire weight on that leg, you would use a crutch. Using the crutch is not saying that you cannot walk. Using the crutch helps you heal faster. It helps you gain more confidence. Similarly, counseling or working with a psychologist need not necessarily be looked at, oh, I have a serious problem, so I'm going to a therapist. It can be, I'm finding it difficult to deal with on my own. So can I use somebody's help till I'm stronger? And then the therapist always makes sure that, you solve your own problems. Our role as therapists is not to advise you or to tell you this is good. That is something that only the movies will do. They'll put you in a trance and they'll bring you out. It doesn't happen that way. In fact, we listen more than we speak. And what happens is we just ask you questions and work through certain techniques to make sure that you are able to find your own solution. So the most beautiful definition of counseling that I use, let me gently hold you by the hand and lead you back to you. Because you can solve your own problems. So anybody can meet a therapist when they feel that they're not able to make it on their own. And the therapist's role will be to help you find your own strength. So I hope that answers the question.
That was so good, ma'am. And the next one, why is psychology of parenting not taught to the general public?
See, I won't say it's not taught. In fact, it's definitely taught more than it was 22 years back, because I remember when I first started doing sessions for parents, people would say, I know how to raise my child, but more and more it is there. We do require it. I wish we could do more, but I understand that you're asking this because you probably have some small issues with your parents. Remember when I answered the questions, I said, when you work on the relational aspect, please work on building the connection ritual. Right? So I know sometimes our parents can be difficult, can seem like they're very strict and all that. But remember, our parents come from love. No parent comes from hatred. They may not know how to love you the way you understand how you want to be loved. Like, for example, some people understand it when our parents hold our hands or appreciate us. But our parents may think that, I should be strict, only then I'm a loving parent, or I should give my child everything he or she wants. That's how love is. But unless you build a communication ritual and find out how both of you understand love, it may not change. So more than just teaching parents, I would ask you if you would find the courage inside you to build a connection with your parents. Because when you build that connection, every relationship works. So I hope that answers your question.
And who was your inspiration? Do you have a mentor or role model?
No, I think I just wanted to be myself always. I was never inspired by anybody, but I loved my dad a lot because he was very, very hardworking. He's no longer with me. He passed away 10 years back. And from my mother, I learned a lot of courage because she was a very strong-willed person. But right through my life, I've been lucky to be interacting with very beautiful people. When I say beautiful people, people who were very sincere, people who had a lot of integrity, a lot of values that I was able to take in. So I wasn't inspired as much as I was able to learn from them. So I think that's really what.
What is real success in the world?
Success in the world and real success are different things. Okay.
Yeah.
So,
okay.
so I'll explain it.
Maybe sure.
Success in the world is measured by money, fame, power, etc. But real success is when you're happy with what you've done, when you're content with what you have, and you have the courage to say, I've made a mistake, I'm willing to learn from here. Right. So I think real success is different from success in the world.
Thank you so much, ma'am. And which is your favorite book? Favorite book?
I read a lot, as you can see behind me. There are so many books that I have really loved reading. But I think if you were to ask me for one book, I would say There's No Such Place Called Far Away by Richard Bach. I think that's one book that I really liked very, very much.
And, what made you innovate teaching methods using psychology? And why did you choose to work with children?
Actually, if you ask me, I wanted to be a veterinarian because I'm much better with animals than I'm with human beings. But our education system, I didn't get the seat because of all our many cutoffs and everything. So psychology was my second option. It wasn't the first, but I'm so glad psychology happened. I'm so glad it happened because I realized that this is where I've been able to shine the most. So your question about why did I choose to innovate in education?
Innovate teaching methods, yeah.
My education in Delhi, I studied in Delhi University, as you know. I finished my education in Delhi, and when I came back to Salem, my hometown, I realized that a lot of problems for which children were being brought in for counseling were because the education system was very faulty. It did not have the child as the center. We were keeping marks, grades, all these things as the most important things, and the well-being of the child was not so important. So I started setting schools up where I started helping people understand that unless the child is happy, there is no learning. Unless the child is able to find his or her strengths and acknowledge that there will be weaknesses that they can work through, there will be no growth. So that's where I started innovating. And it was a very worth it journey because, in all these years, I've been able to touch so many lives and it's made me very happy. In terms of why do I want to work with children, believe me, I think if you believe in God, I think God comes to the earth as children. So I think my spiritual practice, I don't believe in religion, but I believe that children are closest to what we call God. So it's my faith. That's why I work with children.
Okay, thank you so much. And okay, if you are given a chance to interview, who will you choose? Who will you interview?
I won't because I'm an introvert. I really don't like conversation. Given a choice, I would sit silently, listen to music, play with my dog, and read some books. I'm not really somebody who's into conversation. Though my interviews seem like I'm very, very chatty, I'm not. I actually like silence and solitude a lot more.
That was good to know, ma'am. And from the aspect of a psychologist, is the lockdown a boom or a bane?
See, this is not something a psychologist has to talk about. This is where disease experts who talk about spread of contagious diseases have to talk about. And this is something we have to understand scientifically. See, it will always have a psychological component, will have an economic component. But I think the people who are working with the virus, who have studied the virus for so many years, whether it was SARS or MERS or before that, they are the ones who should tell us if we need a lockdown, number one. However, in a country like India, because there is a lot of disparity economically, a lockdown is not viable for more than a certain period of time. Okay. So what I would rather look at is everything is challenging. And in any situation, I need to use my intelligence. I've been given an intelligence and I've been given access to information. I need to look at information and see what is the most intelligent, safe action that I can indulge in. So at this point, it's not whether it's a boon or a bane. It's about what is my most responsible action here. So there is a quote that says, opinion is the lowest form of intelligence. To say pandemic is a bane or a boon is the lowest form of intelligence. Instead, I need to see how can I make sure that it doesn't become worse? What can I do to ensure that my country is back on its feet economically? So taking responsibility for something, I think, is the most important. So I hope
your answer was so impressive, ma'am, and even I didn't expect this one.
Thank you.
So that was still good, and it's true. Okay. What do you do outside of work that helps you maintain a healthy, well-balanced life?
I go out for long runs and walks. I'm a very physically active sport kind of person. So I do a lot of that. I play with my dog, a black Labrador called Rene. Rene means resurrection. So he is like a very playful puppy. I really do that. And you can see I read a lot, right? So these are the three things that keep me sane, and I love cooking. So I think the pandemic, in fact, has been very good for me because I haven't had to travel. Earlier, I used to travel for almost 25 days in a month, which used to be very tiring. I've been blessed with 9 months of staying at home and doing the things that I love the most. And of course, apart from that, I do bird watching. I take care of plants and trees. I'm a very nature kind of person. So this pandemic has been a time when I've been able to connect with that a lot more.
So nice of you, ma'am. As a part of women empowerment activism, what are your views on the current situation of women in India?
I don't have an opinion again, because I know opinion is the lowest form of intelligence. At the same time, I know that it's not only in India, but all across the globe, gender has been one of the reasons for discrimination, just like religion has been, caste has been in different times. And I really do wish people understand that both genders bring to the world their unique skills. What men bring to the world, women don't. And what women bring to the world, men don't. And as a result, I usually use the analogy of a cart, a bullock cart, having two wheels. If one wheel was smaller than the other, in terms of a circumference, it would be going around in circles and not make any progress. So in a community, in a society, if both genders are balanced, then we'll make progress. If both genders are not balanced, we won't make progress. And I also need for us to understand that in the coming years, it won't be just two genders. There would be a lot more gender fluidity. And we need to sort of understand that we have to respect that there will be more than two genders, and to respect everybody, irrespective of that, is what I think is true empowerment. So I hope that answers your question.
Yeah, that was good. And what are your thoughts on ritual therapy?
On, pardon?
On ritual therapy.
Virtual therapy,
Yeah,
like working on this.
virtual therapy.
I'm personally not somebody, I'm somebody who likes to meet people in person because I believe a lot in human connection. Because, again, I don't believe that just content will help. It's always the connection, right? So I still do believe. But having said this, again, we need to see that, COVID is transmitted through contact, through being in close proximity with other people, right? So since there are limitations, I would definitely suggest that those of you who are seeking therapy can do sessions online. And as soon as possible, if you're allowed to meet a person, your therapist in person, that would be definitely good. But again, Jude, I don't really believe in having an opinion. We need to learn how to adapt, because opinions tend to become compartments, and then they become rigid beliefs, and then they become almost written in stone, and you can't do anything about it. I'd rather believe that being able to adapt to situations are much better. So I hope that helps.
Okay. Last question from the student, ma'am. So what are the good qualities needed to make the day filled with happiness and inner peace?
I don't know if you need good qualities as much as you need to understand that happiness is a product of balance. No extreme. Extremes are excitement. Happiness is balance. So when I'm able to balance and understand ordinariness of life. So for example, as I'm having this conversation with you, I'm very, very comfortable and happy. I'm not getting excited. I'm not trying to impress you. I'm not doing anything. I'm just answering a question. So I understand that happiness is when I choose to take ordinary moments in my life and enjoy them for what they are, not expecting them to be something else, better or worse, just enjoying the current moment in its ordinariness. So, I normally say that, you have anxiety or you have anger or you have negative emotions when you want to be there, but you are here. Learning to be here is the most important key to being happy. So happiness is a door that opens inward, and that involves balance. So I hope that answers.
Sure, ma'am. So nice talking to you, ma'am. Now let me call upon my colleague, Mr. Sriram, to give the vote of thanks, ma'am.
Thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you, ma'am.
A strong woman aren't born, they are made by the storms they walk through. Thank you for the very insightful lecture. It is the most relevant in our current situation where we are fighting for a global pandemic. I'm sure the things you spoke will help our students keep calm and excel in their learning. On behalf of Pushpalata School and Pushpalata Vidya Mandir, thank you so much, ma'am, for spending a valuable time with us. We would like to also thank Oxford University Press for organizing this talk. Thank you so much, ma'am.
Thank you, Mr. Sriram. Thank you.
So, students, you are watching PushpalataLearnEd live channel. If you like this video, give a thumbs up and subscribe to PushpalataLearnEd live. And this is Sriram and Mr. Jude signing off. Take care. Bye-bye.